You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
In no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
I've got a very simple message. It shouldn't be necessary. You have to be very clear. Putin is a dictator.
What happened in the White House yesterday, I was so pissed off.
Congressman Tom Suozzi is the representative for New York's 3rd Congressional District. This district may sound familiar as it's the district that was once represented by con man George Santos. In a beautiful moment of bipartisanship, Santos was expelled from Congress and a special election was held to replace him. His bipartisan expulsion would lead to more bipartisanship in the House, as he'd be replaced by former Congressman Tom Suozzi, who is now the co-chair of the House Problem Solvers Caucus, a bipartisan cohort of Republicans and Democrats that try to find common ground to get things done. Last week, House Republicans passed a budget resolution that would include $800 billion in cuts to Medicaid, as well as crucial government assistance programs. I wanted to talk to Congressman Suozzi to better understand how Democrats, especially those with strong bipartisan track records, are approaching these conversations, and what can be expected for the American people.
I would love to dive into what we were just talking about off camera about Ukraine and what just happened at the White House with President Zelensky and President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. I have to say, as a young person myself, a lot of young people don't really have a perspective on why foreign policy alliances are so important, because we haven't really witnessed a lot of those kinds of tragedies that our parents and grandparents have witnessed. So they might not understand the severity of this moment. So that being said, I mean, as a member of Congress, as someone who has been an ally to Ukraine, who has served in public service for a very long time now, what do you take away from what just happened?
First of all, I just want to say I'm just so angry. I'm so upset. It was such a disgrace what took place in that meeting. And, you know, I'm Mr. Problem Solver, and I want to work together, and I want to try and find common ground. But I'm just so mad right now because I feel like Zelensky was ambushed in that meeting. And the way that Vance conducted himself, and this guy in the audience who was, you know, saying, "Why aren't you wearing a suit? Why aren't you wearing a suit?" I mean, he doesn't say anything about Elon Musk not wearing a suit. I mean, it's just such hypocrisy. You know, I deal with other countries where, you know, people are killed for being a different religion, and people are beaten up, and, you know, people are not allowed to talk. And we are in the greatest country in the world. America is a great country and a good country. And we have allies, mainly in the Western world, but elsewhere, that have practiced democracy and have followed the rule of law. Until the what they call the world order was set up after World War II, a lot of places were in autocratic regimes where people's views were suppressed, where people were jailed for just, you know, stepping out of line. So we set up this world order, and these alliances matter, where we say, we're going to help you because we believe in freedom and democracy, not because you're paying us, not because you're giving us your mineral rights, which is what China does, not because, and I'm not saying, you know, we can do mineral rights deal. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but we're going to support you because you're trying to promote this idea of freedom and democracy and free markets like we do. And so some of these battles really matter. So you know, the Trump administration, different people in it have said, you know, well, you would lose the war. If it wasn't, you would lose because you're a small country fighting the big country. Yeah, a lot of small countries would lose if big countries invaded them. So we're not going to help the smaller country because they would lose otherwise? We're going to say, no, we're going to go along with the dictator. We're going to go along with the people that oppresses their people. We're going to go along with the guys that invade your country and kill your people and rape your women and kidnap your children because you're the smaller country. You would lose if it wasn't for us. That's crazy. And if we abandon Ukraine right now to the dictator, murderer, kidnapper, then what are the neighboring countries that are under the same threat who are shaking in their boots right now? What is Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia and Moldova and ultimately Poland? What do they say? Because they're worried. because they're smaller too. So, we have to believe in something. These expressions are not just throwaway expressions. Some things are worth fighting for. Democracy and freedom and standing up for the little guy who's doing the right things against the big bully is something worth fighting for. And it's not just about, are you going to pay us? So I'm sorry, I'm all amped up right now because I was just watching the video of the meeting in the White House, and I'm just so pissed off.
Don't apologize for the passion or the anger. I think that that's exactly what people want to see from our elected officials right now. And like you said, it's an all-out assault and attack on the principles of democracy, on free markets. And this undoubtedly is going to affect how our allies and people see us on a world stage, not just as it comes to our military alliances, but also economically. Like you talked about the economy. When we have these very protectionist policies that are coming in, they're going to raise the costs for American people.
Let me, because you reminded me I'm speaking to young people when I'm talking on this show, and I want to talk about a basic concept of America. In America, we've got two major concepts: capitalism and democracy. Capitalism is the best economic system in the history of the world. It's lifted people out of poverty. It's created jobs. It's made people's lives better. It's come up with major innovations. It's based on competition. The stronger you are, the smarter you are, the luckier you are, the healthier you are, the bigger risk taker you are, the better you're going to do. And some people are great competitors, and they're going to do great in a system based upon competition and capitalism. But some people are bad competitors. Old people that are getting frail and elderly are not necessarily going to be good competitors. Little babies are not good competitors. People that get hit by a car and get paralyzed may not be a good competitor. Someone who gets cancer or has a mental health problem or a drug and alcohol problem, not everybody's a good competitor. But just because you're a poor competitor, like a baby that's been abandoned or a senior citizen who's on their own and they're getting old and they're getting frail, we don't want you to be relegated to a life of misery, because we've got another system called democracy. And it says all men and women are created equal. And in our country, where we believe that every human being has individual worth and their human dignity, we're going to put rules in place to protect against the rough edges that come along with our system based upon competition. So you can make more money and you'll be a better competitor if you don't put a filter on your smokestack, but it's going to end up killing everybody from the pollution. So we're going to make you put a filter there. Your factory will move faster if you don't put these safety rules in place, but people will get their fingers cut off and their legs broken and their hands broken. So we're going to put safety rules in place. And little babies, and kids and their parents are not necessarily doing great. We don't want them to go hungry. We're going to have lunch at school for them. And we're going to have food programs for them. And senior citizens, we don't want them freezing and being homeless and eating dog food. So we have Social Security and we have Medicare and we have other programs to protect people. So we got to put these rules in place to protect against the vagaries. The problem is you need a balance between the two. If you do all capitalism by itself, you end up with a bunch of successful rich people and a bunch of people relegated to a life of misery. If you do too much democracy and put too many rules in place, you kill the goose that laid the golden egg. So you have to find a balance between these two systems. The problem in our country today and in the world is there's no balance. Everybody's just yelling and screaming at each other. You can't find that balance if people are not working together. So we have to support these two systems, but we have to find balance between the two. And we're losing our balance in our country with everybody just yelling and screaming at each other.
Absolutely. And you bring up Medicaid, Medicare. I think that's a great segue to something that's top of mind for a lot of people. The House just passed the House budget resolution, which I want to clarify is not the actual budget in itself. It's a blueprint for what the House wants to do once the budget actually comes forward. And in that resolution, there were major proposed cuts to extremely important government programs, to things like Medicaid, but also just absolutely senseless economic policies that are going to dramatically increase the deficit and just the ability for the government to function in a productive way. So one of the main things about you in Congress is you wanting to get things done, is you wanting to work across the aisle and bridge that gap to work for your constituents, which is what people send you to Congress to do. So with this House budget resolution that just passed, which was, by the way, along partisan lines. All Democrats voted no, yourself included. Do you think that Democrats will actually have a real say in these budget negotiations that are happening while in the minority? And as a leader in this caucus, would you push your party to support an actual budget bill that follows the outline of this resolution that was just passed by the House?
Well, absolutely not the thing they just passed. It doesn't, it's nonsensical, it's irresponsible. You know, it's talking about $4.5 trillion in tax cuts and $1.5 trillion in cuts to programs. So not only will this dramatically increase the deficit, just as importantly, you can't cut $1.5 trillion the way that they're doing. It's irresponsible. You'll shut down hospitals. You'll shut down food programs. You'll make people's lives miserable. I can't tell. I got to really try and I'm still amped up from the Ukraine meeting, and now I'm thinking about I'm just angry, and I'm not supposed to be the guy who let's work together and let's solve problems, and I got to get back into that mindset. But the reality is that they're doing so many irresponsible things right now. You can't go cut the people that are responsible for overseeing the nuclear stockpile. And they say, oh, we made a mistake. But then they have a hard time hiring them back because they cut them off their emails. You can't go fire the people that are responsible for overseeing the avian flu outbreak because it's serious business. You can't go cut the people that are supposed to be stopping the measles outbreak in Texas, where someone just died for the first time in 10 years from measles. I was on a phone today with a woman. She was hired in July of 2024 to work at the IRS. She's smart. She's a college graduate. She's 27 years old. She was working hard. Her job was to, when her bosses were examining a tax return, for her to verify the information there, to get it from the taxpayer, and to make sure that what they were saying was true. And they're way overwhelmed with so much work. They're trying to hire up more people. We need more people because we're so behind. There's so many people that are not paying their taxes that should be paying their taxes, especially high wealth net individuals. But they fired her. But the kicker is she's 7 months pregnant and she lost her health insurance. So it's just so irresponsible and mean-spirited. If you want to reduce the size of the workforce, you should be reducing it from the people at the top that are making a lot of money, so that when they retire, you don't replace that position. You do it through attrition. Why are you firing the low-level, lowest-wage people that you just hired because you're trying to fix the problems in your agency? So we've got to find out I want to highlight those Republicans that are speaking out. Okay, Don Bacon has come out and said, you got to follow the law. The law's the law. The Congress has got to do it. Mario Diaz-Balart from Florida said, I'm a appropriator. The power of the purse is for Congress. I'm going to zealously guard that power. Gary Palmer, a Freedom Caucus guy, evangelical from Alabama. I see him at the gym all the time. He said the Constitution's the Constitution. You can't eliminate the Department of Education unless you come through Congress. That's the law. Brian Fitzpatrick and Joe Wilson, Republicans, who came out and said, we must support Ukraine. Putin is the dictator. Zelensky was democratically elected. This is a legacy-defining moment. My natural reaction, and any human being's natural reaction, is the other guys do something bad, or they do something stupid, or they take a crack at you, and you want to fight back. And that's my inclination, like anybody else. And I'm mad right now. But we got to figure out how to highlight where there are opportunities for us to find common ground to try and work together. So I'm going to keep on working. I want to make a deal on immigration. I want to secure the border and fix asylum and treat people like human beings and get the dreamers legalized and others. And I'll try and make a deal. And I'll make a deal on the budget too, as long as you don't, stop trying to cut taxes on the people that don't need it. The richest people in the world don't need a tax cut. Don't spend the money there. So you got to cut the poor kids' school lunch program. I'm going to continue to try and keep the anger down and try and let's work together to try and find some common ground to move forward. But let's educate people too, because most people are not paying close attention or hearing all this stuff. Then they're doing it on purpose. They're doing, they said they want to do it with muzzle velocity. They want to have boom, 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 boom. So if they do, 10 things, So what? They do 2 or 3 things that are absolutely absurd and crazy. We'll just move on to the next thing and nobody will pay attention because the media and the public can't pay attention. Olivia, you just happen to get me when I'm all jazzed up because I just watched that.
No, I'm happy to see that you are. You bring up the media and you bring up the Steve Bannon said flood the zone. You've been in public service both on a local and federal level for a very long time. How have you seen the media dynamics change, especially how has it changed in how constituents and voters are actually consuming the information about what's happening in the government? How has it shifted over these last few years?
I first ran for office, 30 years ago. Became the mayor of my hometown in 1994. I was 31 years old, young mayor. And, the media was the traditional media. You did a press release, you did a press conference, you try to get in your local papers, you try to get in your daily paper, the weekly paper, you try and get on your local news station or cable news. And people would, you get in the paper and people would, all kind of be on the same page. And at the national level, it would, we all kind of got the same news. Some small differences here and there, and journalists, didn't have to do something every 15 minutes or every hour or 5 hours or 6. You write a story and you submit it the next day, or maybe take 2 days or 3 days or a week. Now it's breaking news happening right now. This just happened. That just happened. And nobody's getting their news from one source. It's fractured. We're all hearing different things. And people are choosing to stay in their echo chambers and just hear the same thing that agrees with them already. The part of the polarization in our country is that politicians are just pandering to their base because they were worried about a primary as opposed to the general election, because they're going to win the general election because of incumbency advantage and gerrymandering. But they're worried about a primary where very few people vote, and they're often extreme on the right and on the left. And so they pander to the extremes. Then social media, more extreme stuff in different silos. Then people just follow the stuff, who they follow. And the algorithm drives stuff that you agree with already to make you watch it more and more. Cable news, which is really, a small piece of it now. But, Fox News, the most popular person was Tucker Carlson at one time until he got fired. He had 4 million viewers. There's 350 million people in America. He only had 4 million viewers. Rachel Maddow's got 2.5 million, 3 million viewers. And then our foreign adversaries, the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians and North Koreans, they're using our free media, our free speech, and they're flooding the zone with disinformation to try and get people pissed off. Now you got traditional media, then you have social media and people, algorithms and people talking to their groups. Then you have, I think, a great gift to America, which is long form podcasts like yours, where you get a chance to actually talk things out and people are actually paying attention to try and learn about what's happening, which is a great thing. The problem for the Democrats is Trump and the Republicans figured it out before the Democrats did, and they were using long form podcasts for just their audiences and just, out there corrupting them, I believe, with disinformation on a regular basis. But they figured it out. Then you got the national media, and then you got ethnic media. And you have to play in all pieces of the fractured universe. And you have to try and get people where they are, because we're not all getting the same information that we used to. I would love to talk about the things I'm talking to you about to everybody, but I can't. I got to talk to Olivia and talk to her audience, and then I've got to talk to somebody else and talk to their audience, and this one, and it takes a lot of work. And meanwhile, you got to still govern, and then you got to raise money for your campaign, and then you got to write laws. Then you have to respond to constituent issues. Then you have to do press conference. I mean, it's just so much. So we have to figure out how this new fractured media is. It's very different than it once was.
Well, I'll say that I think that you've been doing a fantastic job at navigating that. I've seen you on multiple different podcasts and on social media in the past few weeks. So I think that you have really kind of been one of the Democrats, I think, that is doing a really good job at navigating that and getting out there to different audiences that need to hear different messages. And I'll especially say, I think that you've done a phenomenal job, especially talking about the polarization within political parties. I think that's a huge problem. And I think that we really need more elected officials speaking out about that problem specifically. So thank you for commenting on that.
Well, I appreciate the stuff that you've done. You posted something of mine the other day that helped. Like, I can't believe how many people watched it. So I'm so grateful to you for doing that. And, that's why I'm a little upset with myself, because I do want to work across party lines and get stuff done and trying to find common ground and not just pander to the base. But I'm so angry about this Ukrainian meeting in the Oval Office. It's just so bad for our country and for our reputation with our allies, and just it's so base. That's the word. It's base. It's low. So I have to do a better job. I have to, lift up the conversation a little bit and not sink into the dregs.
I think it says a lot, and I think it speaks volumes that a member who conducts themselves in the way that you do, where you are very bipartisan and you have very good working relationships with all of your colleagues, that you are to this point where you're like, what are we doing? What is going on in the federal government? I think that speaks volumes. And I think that should raise alarms for people on, okay, maybe there's some real interesting and chaotic things happening in the government we need to pay attention to. But I have one final question for you. I would like to ask elected officials this. I'm 22, so I'm very, very young, coming into adulthood the last few years, especially politics. What is one piece of life advice that you have for young people who are entering adulthood?
You have to stick with your values. Work hard and stick with your values. Good things are going to happen in your life, and bad things are going to happen too. And you have to always rely on your values to make your tough decisions, because you're going to have a lot of tough decisions along the way. It'll get easier over time if you stick with your values. So when something bad happens or you have to make a tough decision, you can't rely on, your friend for advice. And you can't rely on your parents. You can't rely on your siblings. You can't rely on your coworker, because they're really not in your circumstances. They don't know every single input that you have. The only thing you can rely on when making a tough decision are your values of what you know is right or wrong. And if you just look to that value, regardless of how other people are going to respond at first, or regardless of how it's going to offend somebody else, or somebody's going to be mad at you for doing it, if you rely on your values, the decision will become a lot easier. You will know what is right and what is wrong, and you will try and do the right thing, and then it'll make it easier to go forward. So work hard and stick by your values, and things will be a lot easier. And when the bad things come, because they're definitely coming, last thing that kind of goes along with this, my grandfather, born in Italy, my father was born in Italy, my grandfather would give advice at family weddings, and he would say, what's marriage? Che cosa matrimonio? He'd say, what's marriage? It's like a long journey with a lot of ups and a lot of downs. He said, but that's okay, because in life, non ci sono rose senza spine. You can't have a rose without the thorns. You can't have the good things in life without the suffering as well. So you're going to have bad things happen in your life, but just stick with your values, keep on working hard, and keep on moving forward. It's all going to work out.
Well, I think the best type of advice that you can get from someone is clearly advice that someone themselves follows. I think that's how you've managed yourself in Congress. So I think that it's probably a good piece of advice for young people to listen to. Congressman Suozzi, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been very enlightening. And I hope that you have a more peaceful week going back to Congress next week to work. Hopefully we'll get some good things done. But Godspeed to you. I'll say a prayer.
Thank you, Olivia. I need that. I appreciate it very much. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.